This video is sponsored by Morning Brew. Creativity starts with stealing, but it doesn't end there. The creative process, when done right, culminates in something so interesting that others are now compelled to steal from you. That's when you know you've done your job, when you're the person getting robbed from. Much of this YouTube channel started off from stealing. First, stealing from the ideas of others, people like Jordan Peterson, Gary Vaynerchuk, David Goggins, stealing from their actual works, then parodying them, and then talking about the people I'm inspired by. Whenever I do a long tracking shot inside a video and all the hues are blue, of course I'm stealing from people like Christopher Nolan or Denis Villeneuve. These are some names that I've brought up over and over again on my channel. But when I was starting out and I wanted to be a creative, just make money from my creativity, I couldn't get there. I was broke, and I stayed that way for almost 8 years. And in fact, when I think about most people who pursue creative work, most people never get out of that struggle phase. There's this trope of the starving artist. It's a phrase because it's so common. A lot of people who make the venture towards creativity, like a creative career, is associated with not having money, which is unfortunate because every innovation, every corporate job is on some level the product of creativity. Creativity is nothing more or less than solving problems and fostering innovation based off of what's happened before. But when we think of creative success, we tend to think in terms of extremes. You either make it or you don't. You leap and the net appears, you go to Los Angeles to pursue your dreams of acting, and you either spend your whole career standing in a line, like waiting to get into an audition, or you're like a movie star. There's no in between. When in fact, there are so many levels to success, and it is so possible to be a successful creative today that it's unfortunate that so many people sell themselves short by choosing a career that they don't like or never ever getting to pro with their creative endeavors. I recently read through this book, Real Artists Don't Starve, and it's a book that I wish I actually read like 8 years ago. And more so than reading, I wish I would have implemented the philosophy inside of this book way sooner, because I think I would have been further along, or at the very least, I would have struggled less. So in this video, I want to cover 5 of my favorite ideas from this book on real artists not starving, because these are ideas that I wish I knew about sooner and that I wish I practiced sooner. And the first idea is that of seeking out an apprenticeship or a mentor, coaching of some kind. People like Tai Lopez, I feel like, have sort of bastardized the word mentor.
Mentors. The great Nikola Tesla had mentors.
So much so to the point where I never really considered mentorship or coaching apprenticeship as a serious way to level up my career. But in recent months, I have taken on a few people who I get coaching advice from. One is my strength trainer, and the other is John Sonmez from Bulldog Mindset, if any of you have run across his channel. I pay a pretty premium rate for both of these things, and at first I questioned the power of having a good coach, but it has saved me a lot of time, a lot of effort. With the strength coach in particular, I feel like I've made more progress in strength training over the last 3 months than I had in the first 7 years of lifting weights. I've been lifting ever since college, but I feel like I'm really only just getting started and not just spinning my wheels. And that's entirely the result of coaching. And here's what the author has to say about apprenticeship. We love to praise the big break, that wonderful moment when stars align and serendipity visits you. We wait for such moments, but the big break is a myth. We all get lucky, but oftentimes luck is the result of long years of preparation, often under the tutelage of a master. When the young Michelangelo approached a famous Florentine artist, he might have had a lump in his throat, and yet he decided not only to ask for an apprenticeship, but also to get paid for it. In what might have been a monumental moment for both artists, Michelangelo met Ghirlandaio with a combination of fear and respect. He assisted his master whenever needed, I'm sure running many menial tasks, but in the process also learning what it's like to be one of the premium artists in Florence, what it's like running a big studio, what it's like interacting with patrons, the responsibilities, the social dynamics. We can't overlook the importance of skill in the practice of apprenticeship. And if you want to make progress in whatever career you're venturing into, I would recommend getting the money, saving the money, getting their field of view, and then from the right person, getting coaching, because 1 hour of coaching with the right person could save you 6 months. A channel I've been watching a lot of recently is called First Man. I'm a big fan of that creator. And in a recent video, he talked about how there's 3 levels of self-improvement. There's fluff, there's general, and then there's specific. And fluff self-improvement is things like the law of attraction, affirmations, visualization. I believe in all of these things and I practice them when I can, but it's sort of fluff. It's affecting you in a loose landscape. Then there's general self-improvement tactics, things like waking up early or making a checklist. Successful people often do these things, so yeah, it's probably good that you should do some of these things. There's a better chance of moving towards success if you do those things. But then there's specific, and very few people are teaching or learning specific knowledge for success. What's specific? Maybe you need to learn a certain certification. There's one programming language that if you learned, it would catapult your career. Or learning something about sales funnels or prospecting. You're probably one skill or one contact away from making radical progress in your career. And so that goal of yours that could be years away, you could actually bring far closer to you if you just have the right connection, the right mentor. And when you finally get a mentor, when you finally get a coach, be extremely teachable, be extremely open-minded, because only by doing this can you catapult your career and get closer to what you want faster. The second idea is don't let perfectionism get in the way. An artist's job, a creator's job, an entrepreneur's job is to just keep creating, keep doing the work, never ever worry about perfectionism. An example that's true for me in recent times is I'm getting going on a weekly newsletter, and I recently made a landing page because I'm starting up coaching services soon. And in the pursuit of trying to create this landing page, me and my web developer, we took a copywriting course together. We're still not sure if it is, the perfect landing page or anything, but it's just that process of creation and doing. And that same mindset that I've often applied to YouTube success, which is make videos and don't worry about perfection, try to get perfect later, is what I've been applying to these other elements of digital creation that I feel very uncomfortable with. Sometimes when we see a creative person succeed, we dismiss what they've created as a result of their inherent genius. Because this person's a genius, they're destined to create great things. But oftentimes the people who are the most genius, who produce the best stuff, they're actually just experimenting and failing the most. Hoyt van Hoytema, a great cinematographer that I respect and admire and kind of look up to, he said that he was kind of broke and destitute into his early 30s. He was pacing around his apartment in his underwear, smoking cigarettes. And when he finally started getting work as a DP from some great directors on big budget movies, he was always super scared, but he just told himself, don't be too precious, don't worry too much, just keep filming, and eventually something interesting will happen. Which goes to show that even the greats, they try not to let perfectionism get to them. They're actually just focused on trying to keep doing it. But the more you do it, the odds increase that you're going to make something good. But if you don't create, if you just wait for precious content or precious work to be created, you're just going to be staring at a blank screen. The third idea that I really have loved and indirectly have been talking about for a couple years now is that of patronage. You need a patron. What is a patron? In the past, with the Medici family in Italy, a patron is someone who would basically pay for the artist to create their works, to fuel their vision. They were the invisible influencers making it all happen. These people would lend their resources and influence to help creatives succeed. And every artist, everyone who's trying to make their dreams come true, needs a patron. I remember one time when I was in LA, there was someone who showed up on a commercial shoot that I was working on. I was the PA on a exercise bike commercial, and this guy showed up and the director said, hey, that's my buddy over there, he just became a billionaire. And I thought he was joking, or I thought it wasn't real, but somehow I later met that same person at a house party. It's really bizarre that I met the same person twice in these two different circles, but it was Evan Spiegel, at the time the youngest billionaire of the world, Snapchat's CEO. And even just meeting Evan Spiegel and shaking his hand, initially not knowing who he was, kind of broke some paradigms in my brain, because I thought, oh, I didn't know someone so young could make so much money or start a company that could get so big. And so naturally, I became curious about him and I researched him. Turns out he had patronage as well. You have to have people who believe in your vision before things can get going. Unfortunately, many of us, we don't have the benefits of having the Medici family fuel our dreams, help us become artists. And so I have often considered the day job as the perfect source of patronage in the modern world. Be your own patron by getting skilled in a day job that can fuel your dreams. Not all of us will be so lucky as to have a wealthy investor show up in our studios, as was the case for Michelangelo, but patrons are all around us, and sometimes these are even in our day jobs. When you find yourself in a position that's less than ideal, don't stare at it begrudgingly. See it as an opportunity. Stare at that time you're putting into that opportunity, that day job, as time you're biding for yourself. Store away that money or spend it in a direction that can make you closer to the artist that you want to become. Any job can be a means to making your art if you have the right perspective. Employers become patrons when we begin to see them not as obstacles to the work we want to do, but as a way of funding it. In fact, for the first 2 years of being a Salesforce developer, every Zoom call, every meeting I would take that I would feel like I'm grudgingly working through, I would remind myself that I'm making this money at this day job so I can spend money on the side and reinvest it into my craft and then one day become so good that I can take it full time. The fourth idea that I really love is go join a scene. The starving artist believes that he can be creative anywhere. The thriving artist goes where creative work is already happening. Location, in addition to real estate, also matters for creativity and entrepreneurship. And not just like the location of, you know, because Hollywood is in Los Angeles, we have to go to LA and be in entertainment. Right next to you, in your like 30-mile surroundings, there is a place that is full of inspiration for just what you need to be doing. You just don't know about it yet, maybe. This is the rule of the scene, which says that the places and the people that we're around shape the success of our work far more than we realize. Location is not irrelevant. Places matter. The author of Flow, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, he has said the same thing. He said creativity is more likely in places where new ideas require less effort to be perceived. Now, this is one of the reasons why sometimes when I get stuck making a video, I deliberately seek out locations that are exciting, just because filming in a new spot gives me creativity, gives me inspiration, or just the right phone call or the right chat, connection with the right person. I'm considering getting a WeWork in a hip part of Minneapolis because the surroundings are with all of these people who are inspiring, who are creative. These interactions, this tasting of you and your environment, where you just like seep into the culture that is creative and inspired, is super important. Some places just have this it factor. You can see this in architecturally beautiful cities like Rome or Paris, which are full of amazing art, which is why in like the 1920s and beyond, all of these great authors and painters ended up in Paris to like fuel their writing career. The personal computer revolution launched itself in Silicon Valley, so people who wanted to like have a startup went to Silicon Valley. This applies to creative work just as much, if not more. Now, a way I try to expose myself to new ideas is not just through coaching or like great locations, networking in the right scene, but it's also through what I read. I, of course, read a lot of books. I probably now average like 2 hours of reading a day. And for the longest time, the books I would come across at the bookstore were my main source. I would just look for attractive book covers and be like, oh, that seems like a cool, helpful book. I'll read that one. But for the last year, I also exposed myself to new ideas through Morning Brew, which is a daily newsletter and the sponsor for today's video. Morning Brew is a free daily newsletter with the best insights on business, finance, and tech. Traditional news is something that I never read. I never read anything like CNN because it's often very dark, depressing, sensationalized. It's just dry and dense as well. Morning Brew, on the other hand, is witty, it's informative. The writing is very fun and approachable. And I've been reading Morning Brew for like a year and 4 months now. They've been a huge supporter of my channel. And I've been exposed to a whole bunch of news stories, a whole bunch of topics for videos I could make that I would not have come across otherwise. This week I learned that there was actually a SpaceX NASA ship that actually just landed after 200 days in space. It was called the Dragon Endeavor, and known as Crew 2, this was the second of 6 NASA SpaceX joint missions. And as soon as they landed, actually Crew 3 is going up. It's going up tomorrow. I also learned this week that the US has reopened its border for international travel in 30 countries. This is particularly relevant and exciting news because Thomas and I, we were planning on going to Ireland in the fall to work on a short film, to make my first short film, but we couldn't because of those travel restrictions. But because things look like they're starting to move in the right direction, this might be something that could be back on the table for the spring. There's no reason not to subscribe to Morning Brew if you're interested in business, finance, tech. It's something I read in the morning as I go through email, just because I know I can come across a story that's going to excite me, that I'm glad I knew about. If you use the link in my description box, you can subscribe to Morning Brew for free. It only takes 15 seconds to subscribe. There's no reason not to. Sponsors like Morning Brew that help us reinvest in the channel and make more high effort videos. So thank you, Morning Brew, for sponsoring this video. Thank you all for watching. The last point I want to talk about that I think is vastly important is the idea of practicing in public. Genius happens in groups. Creative output is a slog that is often slower and more grueling than people realize. The best artists, the smart ones, tend to involve other people because you need other people to correct your path. I often looked up to Ben Affleck and Matt Damon for their screenwriting skills. I recently watched their newest movie, The Last Duel, which was so good. I'm really sad that it actually tanked at the box office. But what I learned from a recent interview between the two of them is that Ben Affleck and Matt Damon, they don't write scripts together by typing at a computer separately. What they do is just sit next to each other and then they just talk it out, and they have something like a recorder running. They work through their script writing efforts just by chatting with each other and just actually having those conversations. And this actually allows the dialogue to be funnier, more realistic. Dialogue is like one of the hardest things to write. And immediately as you're talking to someone else about a script idea, if something seems outlandish or it doesn't work in the moment or it doesn't feel right, then you have someone there who's just as passionate as you to sort of counter you on that. I'm hoping to do this myself as I try to write my first script because I'm not much of a writer, so I'm working with a friend of mine, actually someone at my old job.
I said Ruth is my screenwriter friend. Ruth has a real strong feeling for Adam Driver, and I don't blame her. I find him very, very sexually appealing.
And we're hoping to start this process of working on a script together this winter because you need that motivation to get writing. J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, it turns out, would actually meet up every week, every Thursday I believe it was, to go over what they had written that last week of their books. And it often has been like jokingly theorized that perhaps Tolkien wrote everything Wednesday night because he knew he had to see C.S. Lewis the next day. I don't know if that's true, but it definitely rings true. Even Arnold Schwarzenegger, in many of his books, he said that the most important thing for his fitness goals was having a training buddy. And the guy was incredibly self-motivated, but he knew that if he had a training partner there, that he would just be more competitive, more motivated to lift heavy, and he'd be held accountable. These are the 5 ideas that I've enjoyed the most in this book, Real Artists Don't Starve. And it's true, as an artist, you don't have to starve. Like, that's a fallacy. You can actually thrive in a creative career now more than ever. And for those of us who are willing to chase creativity and money, to us I say, greatness is coming. Cheers.